There is a lot of people out there that are doing amazing work, listening to the land without needing to see the check or the common agricultural policy change. And they're listening in a completely different way. And thank God, because they're people that we're modeling some of our ambition on. You know, like, this is what your farm might look like in 5-10 years. We're using these Farming for Nature ambassadors to show them. And it all depends on how people change. Do you first need a consciousness shift, or do you need something to trigger a consciousness shift? Which one is it? We all approach transformation in different ways. For me, I needed stimulation. I needed a stimuli to change my consciousness. Then I could change my outlook and ultimately what I chose to do next. And some people, you know, they can get that by introspection, and that's maybe some more of these nature-based farmers that are already doing it. And some people need it through exploration. You know, the introvert, the extrovert. I'm an extrovert. I absolutely need other people to process with.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess. The story of Spaceship Earth is simple. We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. Like a spaceship, we have a finite amount of supplies with an intelligent operating system called nature, which keeps everything replenished as long as we all respect it and participate wisely. In this podcast, I'm in conversation with folk involved in regenerating life, shifting consciousness and reimagining how we can live more beautifully and peacefully. I talk with artists, writers, activists, designers, adventurers, healers, farmers, creative mavericks, and more. Their stories invite us to participate in the co-creation of life-sustaining cultures, in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth.
Greetings, Earthling. Welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast. This is Dan here. Thank you for showing up and tuning in. In this episode, I'm hosting Matt Smith, CEO of landscape restoration charity Hometree in Ireland. Matt is a real force of nature, lifelong ocean being, surfer, regenerative farmer, tree planter, and co-founder and CEO of Hometree. Now, I first met Matt several years ago through my relationship with surf brand Finisterre, where Matt is an ambassador, and also on a visit I made to the regenerative farm Matt helped set up on the Atlantic coast of Ireland, Moy Hill. If you're interested more in that project, check out episode 62 with his co-founder Fergal Smith. So Hometree, which actually began at Moy Hill as a tree planting charity set up by Matt and his fellow co-founders, it's a project which connects people with nature and facilitates a variety of projects that are fundamental to addressing both Ireland's declining biodiversity and the unfolding climate challenge. In their words, Hometree is a nature restoration charity based in the west of Ireland. We work to establish and restore resilient habitats, focusing on native temperate rainforests. Our approach integrates community, culture, science, and natural systems through afforestation, conservation, restoration, and education. We hope to nourish the landscape and create new ways for communities to relate to nature. So this was a raw, open conversation which took place in the spaceship shed at the bottom of my garden as Matt dropped by on his way back to Ireland after a retreat here in England. It speaks to the birth and mission of Hometree, the grief, contradictions and challenge of operating in these times, the hard realities and somewhat in my view, perverse contradictions of trying to regenerate ancient lands and bring back the wild forests while the climate is breaking down, and having to work with the constricting, exhausted logic of capitalist economics, which again reminds me of the kind of extreme monetary logic of modernity and how regeneration is trying to exist, to establish itself, to take hold within the decaying husk of these systems. It's a conversation about the role of creativity and arts in helping to weave ecological cultures. And above all, it's a story and a conversation of an inspiring group of humans working with trees, farmers, communities, and many other species to bring life back to the lands of Ireland. There's much wisdom, honesty, and insight in Matt's story and his sharings and the way he sees things. I really hope you enjoy this one, and if you do, please share it with a friend. We'd be most grateful. We're an ad-free podcast, so we rely on recommendations. So let's cut to it. This is the Spaceship Earth podcast in conversation with Matt Smith from Hometree. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
So Matt, welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
Yeah, feels like I'm in a spaceship. This place is mental.
Yeah, this is This is the spaceship shed, yeah. And it's lovely to have you here. There hasn't been that many folks who've made it into the shed.
Great,
since the world went, very, very Zoom-like. But a few have, and it's nice because it's definitely just a different vibe, isn't it? When we're like together,
it's the kind of most luxurious thing of our times, isn't it? In real life, never mind the Ferraris, it's about one-to-one connection. So yeah, we're absolutely in luxury.
And well, yeah. I mean, how are you showing up? How are you showing up today?
What can I say? I was late because I was shoving a Sainsbury's cheese and onion sandwich into me. I was pretty. I needed a bit of grounding, so cheap bread and cheap cheese hopefully is going to do the job. I actually just left a really beautiful camp just outside Reading, near Wallingford. It's called Sacred Arts. It's a Dance as a Universal Peace Camp. There for 8 days. It was absolutely exquisite, and this is the first conversation I've had since leaving there, and apart from with a 2 and a 5-year-old. So yeah, feeling pretty kind of floaty, pretty airy, and also confused about entering the real world again, but we can touch on that in a bit.
Yeah, re-entry. I've been sort of off the last couple of weeks, a couple of various, 2 different sort of, one was a training on Dartmoor, and then I went to some gathering retreat this week, and they've both been extraordinary, like to have that space. But I'm not quite sure where I am at the moment. I'm trying to sort of re-enter, but my body's definitely freaking out a bit. I
love the spaceship kind of metaphors. Let's go. Yeah, get a counter. See how many we can get.
Yeah. What was the camp then?
Do you know the? Do you ever come across the Dances of Universal Peace?
I don't know if I have.
They originated from Sufi dancing, Sufism, and from ultimately from Islam, but as you know, more open-minded or hippies got them, they turned them into the Dance of Universal Peace. They've been going in this one spot where I go to, out between Reading and Oxford. They've been going for nearly 30 years, and it's 8 days, no drink, no drugs, no phones. 500 people get together there's workshops and yoga and mindfulness and stuff in the morning, and then in the evening from 8 till 10:30 there's just the most divine meditative dances with some of the best musicians, and there's musicians in the middle, and there'd be a kind of leader, a teacher, a singer, and they would teach you a song, and you'd all learn the lyrics. There might be 4 lines, there might be 10, there might be 2. You'd learn the song, and then they'd teach you a simple dance, and you'd be in circles, and so there'd be 1, 2, or 3 circles, people holding hands, and you'd sing and dance around the band, and after a few minutes you're just in the sweetest meditation. And I think, for me it's a meditation. I'm an extrovert, so I kind of need people to process, and I need stimulation to relax, but it's just a really beautiful way to be connected with people, without having to rattle off hours of storytelling about their day or their month or their year, to actually see and humanize them. And these dances are so beautiful. I could sing you 1 or 2 if you want. I've got a few at the tip of my tongue. So yeah, just left there, been there with my family and a couple of friends from Ireland. So.
Nice. I'm always curious, as in this moment, trying to bring it into this moment in time when I'm having conversations, and I'm obviously there's a lot going on our spaceship Earth right now, and I'm just always curious about how people are experiencing what I would call the vibes on board this spaceship right now. And I just wonder whether we could start just to understand how you're experiencing, how you might describe life right now.
Like, I left the camp and it felt like the frame rate was off. I was driving down the road and it was like jittery. I was like, someone needs to change the playback speed. It was, and so that's the kind of vibe that I'm in. But I'm sounding like I'm super cosmic and wacky. The vibes, yeah, like, again, leaving the camp feeling a lot of grief, just because I was opening up to sweet surrender, opening up for the last week. And the vibes are, feeling tender, kind of a bit of grief, bit vulnerable. But, I work like in a land-based space. I work for a nature restoration charity. We're in Ireland. I've also done a ton of work at sea, and growing vegetables, had a really cool life. But the vibes absolutely would be like one of deep grief. Like, we are in an absolute ecological pickle, really, from our connection to nature and the condition of most of the kind of land that we steward, not the organization I work for, but us humans in general. And it's really not in a good way. And I would be fairly doubtful, like the path that we're on, or the train that we're on, isn't going to get us to some kind of utopia. So, but there's some cool people, and I'm just in the sweetest bubble because I'm just hanging out with people that are getting on with it, that have an open mind, that really want to see the world look different, and be different. So I am like one of the chosen few. But yeah, there's also a feeling of guilt, confusion around that too. And I've got a couple kids and my own woes, so it's just trying to wrestle all of that into some kind of shape and, get out of bed and get on with it.
Yeah, it's quite a lot to hold these days, isn't it? Sort of being human at this moment in time. It's like, because I was thinking, this morning, I was trying to think back when I last spoke to you. And I think it was during lockdown, perhaps.
It was, yeah. It was, I just left growing vegetables, just stopped working at Moy Hill, and was really trying to go like, what is the next phase? And I knew that you were kind of systems thinker, and I just knew that there was like certain people that I just needed to like chat to. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew that I was curious. And spent 6 months, COVID was real good to me. Spent 6 months just imagining and designing, really. And it's been crazy how that kind of respite was good for me, and good for the organization that I set up. And I really knew what I really knew what I didn't want at the time. So kind of chatting then was helpful. And again, just I'm a very lucky person, so I had a lot of different opportunities to me. So finding out what I didn't want was kind of nearly as important as finding out what I wanted.
Because I think I remember we our paths crossed through connecting in what was through Finisterre, but it was, and obviously your long history with the ocean and as a surfer and ambassador within Finisterre, and I think we'd met somewhere along through those threads. But then I remember coming out to Moy Hill one year. I think it was with my oldest daughter. And I remember you were, because I noticed, you were really getting into trees. When I came out, there was a whole, you were really, because obviously there's the veg stuff going on. But I remember noticing that you had this real energy for tree planting that was starting to happen. And then I also remember then having a conversation at some point where I think you'd gone down you'd really sort of opened up into the deep adaptation work, Jen Bendel's work. And then I think, then I think the next thing I was aware of was the birth of Hometree. So I was just wondering whether we could just maybe, just give the listeners a little bit of like the threads really that have led to this, and then we can maybe talk about the project.
Great, So, Jesus, how to kind of summarize? I'll go back as far as I can, and I'll move as fast as I can. So, grew up in Cornwall in the real western tip in Penwith, so like the last kind of parish of Cornwall, which is a place called St Ives. Mum was a Cornish woman, kind of grew up in the 70s and 80s, was a socialist. She became a professor of politics and sociology. So I grew up really like as a socialist, really like from her kind of worldview, a feminist socialist. Dad was from Liverpool. He was an absolute amazing entrepreneur, really seen the world in a very particular way. Left school at 16, went to sea for a bunch of time. So I grew up in this like mad place, but it was also St Ives, so it was like full of art and creativity and exploration. And then I just grew up basically in the heyday where there was money in town from tourism, but we also knew that climate change was kind of upon us, and in a diet of kind of the Guardians, the Observer, the Huffington Post, all of this stuff. And also at the time where like universities started to kind of crumble a little bit, and they weren't once what they once were, and they became expensive, and capitalism was really starting to kick in. So I left school, went traveling a little bit, and then went sailing for about 10 years, hitchhiking at first, just around the world. I just didn't want to use fossil fuels. So did about 10 years at sea. My last 2.5 years, I made quite a bit of money, made about 100 grand I put in the bank working on a nice sailing boat. And then on a trip back to Ireland, because in the meantime, I was also surfing heavy waves in Ireland, got sponsored for surfing, so I was having a little bit of a passive income there. On a trip back to Ireland, was hanging out with two buddies, Mitch Corbett and Ferg Smith, and they had a veg patch in their garden, which was like 4 foot by 10 foot. But it was the birth of like a community farm in the west of Ireland, and spent like 7 years, just completely volunteering my time. And we set up a 70 acre mixed regenerative farm. By the end of it, we had turkeys, cows, pigs, 4 acre orchard, feeding 150 families, had a pretty decent turnover. It was just paying for its own existence, but it was scaling pretty well. And it also really dawned on me that 70 acres was it wasn't even, you couldn't see it from space, you couldn't even see it from like high up in the sky. And I just knew that it probably wasn't where my life's work was gonna be. And at that time, for a few chances of fate, including deep adaptation paper being published by Jen Bendel, it just sent me on a bit of an awakening really around what I wanted to do with my time. And after a 9-month kind of a re-emergence or something, Hometree charity, nature restoration charity, was kind of born in 2020, and we had no land, no money, no staff. In 2020, my first kind of everything was done in the back of a Hi-Ace on my computer, and fast forward 4 years, we've got 30 full-time well-paid staff. We steward around 3,000 acres. Our turnover last year was a couple of million, probably be 5 this year. and it really does feel like we might make a difference. Like we're looking at 10 years. In 10 years from now, we're hoping to be stewarding around 60,000 acres, some land that we own, mostly land that is currently in like indigenous ownership, native ownership. But underpinning that is just like layers and layers of rich like biodiversity, complexity, neurodiversity. It's everything woven through, and there's an appetite for it. Obviously, we're in like one of the richest countries in the world. Obviously, we have this amazing platform, so we feel really blessed. And what else would I miss? Throwing in the kids and my own work, and trying to stay in the sea. Bunch of work for Finisterre, like they've been, kind of Tom, David, Lawrence. They've all they've believed in what I've done year on year, and have had financial support from them. I do some work, I do hours as well as just being myself and surfing, and I'm still managing to catch probably one or two absolute screamers a year, so it feels good. Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot going on there. Just tell us about, just for listeners, like what is like the mission of Hometree, and like just give us a bit more context of like what caused you to sort of land on that, and just give us a sense of what its mission is, and what does it look and feel like? How does it operate?
Yeah, I suppose.
Why does it exist?
Why? Yeah, I mean, Ireland would be one of the kind of. It is the most depleted country in Europe for nature. We have the worst connection to nature out of all of the European countries. So it was important that was addressed. And when you set up a charity, literally the first box you tick is, does another organization exist that you could go and support with your time? Because as a trustee or a board member, you're volunteering. And at the time, I believe there wasn't. And it was at the very kind of start of like ESG or CSR or, companies, instead of giving, donation to the school or the kind of football team each year, they were starting to give it towards nature. And I just seen that there was an appetite for it. I also, I suppose what I have to offer is mostly around like supporting and facilitating and converging and, believing in really good people and not holding them back. And that's kind of what I've done. The 3 or 4 things that I think have worked well in my life is just being like, wow, that's really cool. Kind of get it. Happy to move fast. Got an appetite for risk, and happy to kind of keep unlocking. So I've got a very good overview of the organization. I am the chief exec, so I report to the board, and make decisions on budget and vision and things. But what we do is we take grassland ultimately, or very marginal land, bushy land, and we try and return it to a complex ecosystem, complex woodland that is nature really beautifully expressing itself. And we in the west of Ireland, there's so much humidity, so much rain. They're called temperate rainforests. The grassy field that you see in most European landscapes is probably 12 to 15 different grass species. Most of them are non-native, and even if you just let the corner of the field go a bit wild, you've got the briars, the brambles, the rushes. That's 2 more species. By just not putting them back, then you've got the willows or the sallies, the birch, the alder come in. And you can really see quickly nature does want to become more complicated, express itself, and it's a pleasure to work there. Like the organization now, there's 30 people. 6 of them work in a nursery just growing saplings. It is a farm, it's production. About 6 of them work on nature connection, so bringing people closer to the work that we're doing, but even just bringing them closer to their understanding. There's no point just kind of shoving information down people's throat. You've got to help slow down first so they can actually understand where they are at in terms of their connection to themselves before understanding what their connection to nature might be, and then we can kind of build from there. Sometimes we have an hour, sometimes we have weeks, months or years, so there's a lot in it.
Wow. So right now, in terms of how do you start to find land. How does that work? I guess some of it is owned by families and farms, and then I guess I'm guessing there's tensions with how land is being used, and just give us a sense of like what do the projects look like, and how is it kind of rolling out, and how do you decide what the land wants, and who's in that process? And
well, it's definitely not me anymore, but I choose the people who chose to make, to kind of frame the decision making. Usually the land has its own ideas about what it would become. It's humans that are kind of asking it to be different over and over again. Ireland's really unique. 80% of Ireland is owned by families. Is owned by native or indigenous or local rural people, which is really different in countries like Britain, for instance, and Scotland and America, Australia, Canada. They're all kind of got their whole, how do we get people back to indigenous ownership, which Ireland actually isn't having that wrestle. So it's really interesting. 80% of Ireland is owned by 140 roughly 1,000 farmers, and they all own about 34 hectares each. So if you wanted to say get half of the people that own Ireland into a room, you'd need the biggest stadium that we have there. And in England, they'd get into a cab.
Wow.
They'd get into a taxi, and three or four people could change the fate of Britain's natural ecosystems. And in Ireland, you'd need a fucking stadium. So we're really working with those people. And right now, we've been going 4 years. We've been going, it actually opened 10 years ago, but since this kind of vision and stuff, it's been going for 4 years. So right now we're just working with warm people that are kind of open to change, open to support in adding nature to their land, adding woodland systems. And there is support from the state for them to do that, but mostly it's just a massive information gap. There's a massive gap in terms of how if you want someone to change, what do you do? You don't just send them a gym membership or send them a pair of soccer boots, or no one's going to change with a pair of soccer boots landing in their house. Probably how they're going to change is letting them identify what they'd like to see different in their life, and then offer them a suite of solutions over and over again until they find the path that works best for them. That's what we do in real time. There's a lot of state support for people to transition their land, but that space of transition isn't being held. So we just hold that. So we'd go to the farmer, the landowner, often that has land next to one of our sites, and would say, this is what we're doing. What are you up to? And we just build that relationship out. And over time, they might ask for 10, 5, 20 acres of their land to be put into woodland. We'd then help them through that process, make sure that their farm finances weren't affected by the transition, because these are 140,000 small businesses ultimately. I could literally go on forever, so you're going to have to really catch me and bring me back down.
No, it's good. It's good.
Onto the ship.
There are two stories on Spaceship Earth, a passenger story and a crew story. The passenger story is based on extraction, transaction and distraction, and it's leading us towards collapse. The crew story is based on connection, cooperation and participation. It leads towards regeneration.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
I'm guessing you get a sense of like you look at Ireland at scale, and you're talking about bringing back the temperate rainforests, and so there's a sense of like a visioning what you can see is possible with collectives of landowners coming together, and then you've got obviously these really highly individual, localized farms and land that are at different states of regeneration or depletion, or so there's just quite a lot of complexity, I guess, in terms of how you're navigating. And then I guess I get a sense that you're trying to bring communities in, right? So this is regeneration that involves people, because there's always that. I don't know. What I see a lot of is we're talking about rewilding and regenerating, and there's a vision of that feels like it's missing people, and then there's a kind of vision which seems to be much more, from the bottom up. So I just said, I don't know what you know about, what you're finding with that. Is that does that play out that dynamic between, the highly local and
we haven't got there yet, because that is like it's one of the things that divide us early, is this like what if, or what about, or at this future place that might be scary, so we don't embark on the journey. Right now it's kind of easy. That it's really complicated, but what we're actually doing is we're staying pretty close to the people that are interested. So we're not looking for division. And there might become a time where that happens, where we're looking at land use, or how my decision might impact your lifestyle or yourself. But we're not asking for people to give their land philanthropically to nature, walk away, don't make any money, and leave the area, which is probably what's happening in some parts of the world for nature. I'm imagining in some big rewilding places, they haven't built a financing mechanism to support the rural people to stay working there, so they're actually like clearing the land of people in favor of nature. And I believe that there's a real danger there, that when those people have gone, there's going to be problems that arise that only people can fix. And then you're going to be having to send these kind of contracting teams in from major cities. And I believe that people right now are key to this next phase. In Ireland, we have a lot of invasive species problem, rhododendron, cherry laurel, and a lot of kind of wild herbivores, non-native deer that are just kind of tearing the place to hell. And we've also got a lot of non-native livestock too, but the deer are like running amok in most parts of the world. It's really interesting. Like, we go and do a lot of research in Scotland, and you could drive hours in Scotland without seeing any rural life, and for me there's a loss there. I love the rural life in Ireland. I love that people are woven through, and I want to support the people that are living in these places to transition, to earn money, and to keep that kind of rural lifestyle going, because I benefit from it. Not that it's about me, but I do love that I get to send my kid to a local school, and I get to
it's because I was this week was down in another part of Somerset, where there's quite a lot of farms are going through a kind of rewilding process, and it's a bit it seems like it's quite a sort of infectious thing, like so if like one farm's going and another farm, a neighbor starts going, and then it seems to be sort of spreading. And obviously my understanding was again that's also land, like soils are very poor. It's very like clay based soils, and actually this it makes much more sense to be moving in a kind of more rewilding direction.
I think it makes financial sense. I mean, I'm not sure what happened since Britain left
Post-Brexit,
Europe, but I think their like nature restoration plan was complicated enough, and I think it really covered that they wanted to bring more biodiversity back into the landscape. So these decisions, or these kind of farms transitioning, it's not just one of altruism. It's absolutely one of like, how do we make money off of the land that we own? And I think that is critical. I think we need to be showing people that they can still look after their families, they can still see a place culturally in their landscapes. I do think that financing, it's really important. I think there's a cap. I think 7% of money spent on nature comes from the corporate market. So this whole idea that nature credits is going to be the kind of silver bullet that saves our ecosystems. Right now, we're not seeing that, even though that's what every single startup nature organization thinks is, wait until Amazon signed the check. 7% of the money spent on nature is coming from corporates.
Where does you talked a bit about animals and species and stuff like that, but is that, again, my understanding, or at least what we're seeing, is this desire to bring back native species, to bring back the species that are also part of that regeneration process, whether that's well, there's stuff going on down here. There's lynx being bred, and and like the beavers are being kind of running loose, and there's like a stalk project. I mean, all kinds of things that are going on, and talking of the wild boar that are kind of
beautiful.
appearing, and
I think it, like, of course I believe that. Of course that's what, this like beautiful world that we know is possible. Of course I buy into that. And but the vision for me, that is avoiding, like, thinking about that for us right now, Hometree right now. But also I think as a collective, maybe collectively we need to really all imagine together. But for me, it's like, of course, goes without saying, I want to see wild animals, wild spaces, wilderness. But like, thinking about that today for the organization that I work for, or the type of person that I am, isn't going to get me there any faster. It's probably going to just send me to sleep, because I just need, it's about kind of turning over the first sod and getting on with it. Like, we if we reach our 10-year targets, which is going to cost us hundreds of millions, and right now we've only ever in the last 4 years made about 4. I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of millions to get to our vision in 10 years. And even if we succeed in 60,000 acres, we've got 3 now, 60 in 10 years, it will still be less than 1/3% of island. There needs to be 10, 20, 30 of us before we're even seeing a difference from space. I don't mean like the whole earth from space, but seeing the island of Ireland looking different. So yeah, I couldn't think of anything sweeter than hearing the wolves howl, or or the like. But what would be really nice is to, in my lifetime or my tenure, is to not see any more species extinct. And that is happening during our watch. And for such a wealthy country like England and Ireland, that feels like despicable, really. That feels like, how could you really, tap out with all the information that we've got and go like, I was cool with that. It would be a deathbed thing going, no.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. So you're like, you have the tree nursery. So you're trying to bring all these native species back, and then you're planting these out across your partner farms.
Exactly.
And then you're looking also at how natural regeneration is part of that as well.
Doing a lot of natural regen. Yeah.
Right.
Most of our sites will be natural regen. What we're trying to do is unlock the financing mechanism for natural regen. Right now, if you've got a grassy field, like a mineral, if you've got good grass growing, you can get money from the government to turn that grassy field into woodland, and you can get paid reasonably well for about 15 years, and then you can get paid 50 to 100 years from now, you can sell a bit of timber and you can make a living off of that. If you've got land that isn't a nice grassy field, like an upland or a mountain land or a bit of boggy land, you can't really get much money for doing that. So our job in the coming years, and we've got 3-4 staff just on that for 4 years, is like unlocking the mechanism for paying for that. The credits are being used as this, like I said, the silver bullet. But if we can't find a third of Ireland is in the uplands, a third of Ireland is used right now for grazing sheep. If we can't find a mechanism that is in good competition with the money for sheep grazing, we won't succeed in anything. So,
yeah, wow, that's quite challenging. Was that land then? If we go back historically, that upland would have been
woodland.
Would have been woodland.
Yeah, I literally everything I say, someone would be able to pick it apart, like the nuance apart.
Sure.
But the broad stroke isn't. I'm not far off. It was about 400 years ago that they brought. I think it is the black-faced ewe. It was a new sheep that they brought into Western Europe, and these sheep could stay in the uplands all year long. They didn't have to come down from the mountain in the winter to stay warm, safe, and eat the good grass. And it was at that point we really started losing like the last bits of wild land that we had in Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and England. And that was when landlords really doubled down on their holdings in these more rural, these more kind of wild spaces. Before, they used to just let the tenant farmer kind of do what they wanted and give them a few quid or a few shillings or whatever each year, just take a bit of tax off them. But when this new sheep came in, they were like, okay, we're back in. And that's when they really like wiped kind of peasant farming off the landscape. sad old day. Yeah.
And I've seen, I think, like some of the way that you're engaging community. I mean, you it seems like you're trying to bring this kind of arts in and the sort of folk culture, and I don't know, I get a real sense that you're trying to sort of.
But it's hard to avoid arts and culture in the west of Ireland.
Yeah.
I mean, it just oozes with it. It's been something that I've always been interested in. You know, I put on my first kind of massive fundraising drive in 2008 in Cornwall with some friends, remembering a friend that had passed, and we raised a ton of money for Surfers Against Sewage, who are doing great work, and it was about bringing people closer to each other. It was, you know, via connection, and it was through music, it was through art, through song and celebration. That, you know, like I just said, I came back from this wacky singing camp. Like it's part of who I am. I don't get too excited about delivering those projects myself now, because there's just really good people that can do it. This year we sent 10 artists, we coupled them with a farmer, we sent 10 artists and we paid them a bursary, so I think they got maybe €8,000 each to spend a year and a half paired with a farmer. They got some support too, and they just had to really understand. We weren't asking them to bring back a painting or a song or, you know, a kind of sculpture. We were just saying, bring us back after learning about their lives, after being in compassion, empathy, and giving them, you know, taking them through workshops, ecological ones, kind of agricultural ones, systemic ones, taking them through these workshops. We go like, cool, come back and tell us what you learned. And they're just starting to kind of, let's, you know, metaphorically wander down the mountain and bring their wisdom. And it really nearly unanimously is one of empathy for the people that are farming this land, which often are given out to in the mainstream media, that, you know, it's the farmers versus the environmentalists.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is make sure that what we're doing is like first going into communities and listening, and it sounds like kind of cheesy and you know, obvious, but it is something that we're putting attention to. But that was supported by Creative Island. You know, that was a grant that we went for. We've been quite, like, our income last year was split nearly third from state financial support from the state to add nature, you know, for our nursery, for our staff, to run programs around forestry, around nature, and then a third would have been through kind of corporate donations, and then about a third from kind of different types of activity. But we have been getting better at writing grant applications, and there are some really good foundations out there that have the same vision, and they have a lot of them are transitioning towards nature-based organizations, and it's great for us because it means that, you know, the phone's ringing and the money's flowing. But I do kind of feel for the organizations that aren't, you know, the charities and the not-for-profits that aren't doing sexy work like bringing back the wolf, you know, and we're kind of ultimately sharing a pot with them, and a lot of the money's going to nature now.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a whole other thing, because I forget his name. Amazing. I saw him actually at the Oxford Real.
Moncon McGann.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're doing stuff with him, right?
He was one of the founding members of Hometree, along with Fergal Smith, Mitch, and myself. He was 10, 11, 12 years ago. Yeah, he's a special man.
Yeah.
Speak to him all the time. He's still on the board. He's the longest serving board member, even though I think the constitution of our board is changing, so you can only do 2 terms from now on, I think 6 years. But we did want to put a special clause in for, you know, these kind of gatekeepers and these, you know, wise, he might kill me if I said elders, but he does have a very wise way about him. And he's doing great work for, you know, culture, but also the ecological culture for sure. Yeah, he was great at it's mind blowing. Yeah, it was just the way he would just flip between just the language and dialect, but just very generous in that sort of really inviting you in. It's beautiful. And tell us about because I guess, you know, I'm you know, with this pod and the exploration, what we're trying to sort of understand and I guess to explore where
where things are opening up, where we're finding ways to invite more communities in to this time, right? We're in this kind of time of huge overwhelm for so many people on so many different levels, right? I mean, you talked about the grief up front, and there is so much that is, depending on the context you're in, but I mean, everyone is carrying loss right now, right? In some level, and pain and confusion and...
I wouldn't say everyone, but nearly everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I sense that everyone is in some way, even if they don't even know it, maybe they don't even know it. But I feel like we're in a time of, the grief is just bubbling up everywhere. And, to try and find our way through. I mean, I was interested, one of the things I'm fascinated with what you're doing is they're land-based. We're trying to find ways to bring life back, not just the landscapes, right, but through involving people in those processes, whether they're landowners, farmers, local communities. And I just wondered whether you could, were there any kind of stories that you might, just projects or scenarios or things where you've really seen this kind of these shifts are starting to happen, where people are, processing, opening up, connecting, sort of where there's kind of stuff emerging, that is, it just gives you that kind of joy, I guess, that there's something deeper that's going on underneath this work.
3 things pop up. One is, if you actually go into a rural community and slow down, you will see like an infinite amount of compassion, empathy, and wisdom towards your neighbor. It's infinitive. It isn't a well that doesn't run dry, and they're challenging to be in because the world is so shiny and fast-paced outside of them. But if you do go into them, they are really special. If you go to any island in the Pacific, any hill in Ireland or Scotland, or if you do get out of the hustle and bustle, you'll find these really transformative spaces. Like the camp that I was just at, the camps that I do go to, there are no drink, no drugs, no phones, a week long, and to have no drinks, no drugs, and no phones. We're humans, right? They are just like the most delicious. That is like the deadly trio. Like, and if you remove them, you have to replace them with something equally as luscious, right? And if you also have no electric, which is these festivals that I go to, there's not electronic music, there's no drink, there's no drugs, and no phones. So you need to replace it with things that kind of nourish the human, that cultivate connection, and that are in some way transformative, just like drink, drugs, and phones are. They all do that for you. And phone, it's like there is an infinite amount of places you can go on the mobile phone. So give me that without giving me a phone, and it has to be through this kind of transcendental experience. But you can do it by singing together. You can't, I don't think, do it by watching a singer, by watching a famous, but you can be entertained and it can be sweet. I don't think you're going to get that from watching Moby or Beyonce, even though she is perhaps one of the people that don't, she's very special, as is Moby. But I think you need to be doing it in these kind of transformative places and, yoga, meditation, but these kind of camps are really special. And what's really interesting about them is they're fairly... And then the last places I do Vipassana meditation, I go for 10 days at a time in complete silence, and they're nearly free. And it is everything that I believe is nourishing. Like if you want the truth, that's the place. And 10 days, again, no drink, no drugs, no phones, no speaking. So we can't lie to each other. The only reason you don't speak is so you don't lie. It's not because the voice is bad. It's just so we can be in truth for 10 straight days. Those places, I think, are the sweet spot.
Have you tried weaving this into tree planting sessions? Because
it's a great question. And I like the organization that I work for, that I set up, like I don't weave much of this wacky stuff in there. And I also don't want to undermine it by saying it's wacky. I don't weave it in because it didn't have to do everything for me all at once.
Sure.
And also it's about bringing culture in, and we wanted it to be really, really inclusive. And part of that was to be we've got this beautiful headquarters, right? It's right on the edge of town, 4-minute walk to town. And we built this beautiful classroom straight away. And literally the day that the classroom was finished, we had someone saying, can I rent the space for yoga? Can I do Qigong? can I rent it for a wedding? And I was just like, hell no. Everyone has to know this is about trees. Trees, 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 trees. Are you going to grow salad in the polytunnel for the workshops? No, this is a tree place for a really long time. We had to cement it into the wider landscape that it was about tree. We weren't trying to get niche. We were trying to be general. And to do that, we needed everyone to drive up that track and go, this is about saplings. This is about trees. And that was it. And we're still there, and we'll be there, I believe, for another 4 or 5 years before we're like, hey, will we do a silent tree planting day? And maybe there's a big enough community in Hometree at that point, enough volunteers, enough staff that like, yes, there is enough for a silent one. But I think you need to get really clear before you get really niche. You know, Finisterre with their coats, for instance, they've got the Nimbus, which is like standard the test of time. You think of Finisterre, you think of the nice, warm, recycled puffer jacket. They didn't get super niche, started making like wacky cardigans until everyone knew who they were, and have taken a lot of wisdom from the team there. Like I said, I still do half a day a week for them and have done for 15 years. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I guess it's just there's a sense, and I guess maybe that's just what comes through being with trees, right? But there is a lot of there's a lot that opens up when you begin to get into relationship with trees. You know what I mean? When you're just from potting, learning, understanding, being with them, whatever. So I'm just curious as like what you're seeing through maybe just the folks that you're working with, or like is this kind of focus on trees? Is it starting to open up?
Like less than 0.25% of Ireland's virgin woodlands remain. I've got no idea what it's like to be with trees. You know, I know that there's a few pockets here and there, but like we don't know what wilderness feels like. It's never been part of, maybe if I go, back through the ages in one of my meditations, I might ask an ancestor or something, whatever. But I don't know. But I do know what it's like to be deeply connected to nature. And it's a great holder of space, and it can be really transformative.
Yeah. What's the what are the trees that you're really trying to bring back? Like, what are the main species? Because you talk about the temperate rainforest, and that has a few.
Like Ireland's really interesting. It's Ireland was separated from mainland Europe a lot. A long time ago, right? So we have about 25 native tree species. England has about 150. Europe has about 500. So we became a kind of isolated when the glacier melted quite early on, and because of that, we have a limited amount of diversity in our woodlands. So similar to the UK, alder, ash, birch, rowan. But what is really fascinating is that of the nurseries in Ireland, there's 2 or 3 really big ones. They're just growing the ones that are kind of commercially viable. They're also the ones that have that people want to buy lots of. They're there to make a living. We don't have any niche minor species nurseries. That's why our nursery's been so successful. If you wanted to buy an aspen, a Gelder rose, a white beam, a wych elm, gorse, you wouldn't be able to go to a shop and buy one. You wouldn't be able to get an Irish species from an Irish seed grown in Irish soil. You would not be able to buy one of those. So in absence, if that didn't exist, and it didn't until we started doing it. And even now, if someone listens to this and it's like, great, I'm going to head down to Hometree and buy a white beam, they're not for sale. We're using them on our site. So you can't actually buy them. And that's why our nursery's been doing so well, because we're actually growing things that you couldn't get before. And we are at this turning, I think maybe you said it before, where there is a lot more, a cultural shift around, ecological stuff. So it is, again, great because the phone is ringing saying, hey, I want a bag of trees, and often we'll get you them as fast as we can. But it's really like everyone can agree on, like we just did an amazing strategy session for the last year with all of our staff and the board, some of our volunteers, and we were like, where do we want to be in 10 years? And it was we got to the agreement on where we want to get to in 10 years. That was kind of a piece of cake. 60,000 acres, 4 or 5 big hubs down the West Coast, these cultural and community-based programs speaking to, everyone could agree on what we wanted to get to and what we wanted to achieve. But when it gets really tricky is how we're going to do it, how fast we're going to do it, and what we're going to do to get there. And that's like, I use this kind of idea is like, everyone can agree that we want to climb Everest, but how fast we go, who we go with, and what kit we want to use is where we're going to fall out. And that's where we're going to find our team is in, pace, equipment, and who.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that? You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
If you'd like to support the running of the Spaceship Earth podcast, head over to our Substack and sign up. You'll get every episode straight to your inbox, weekly writing, plus other crew offerings. We're grateful for whatever you can give. Join us at becomingcrew.substack.com. Wow, what's the biggest kind of project that you're embarking on? Like within all the different, what does it look like? What does the sort of scale of this stuff look like, or from what to what?
It depends who you ask. Like on the ground, the biggest project, in the next 18 months is a real kind of rainforest-centered project, which is 4,000 acres. We want to buy 2,000, or we want to buy about another 1,000, and we want to support another 1,000 of partner landowners. That feels kind of tangible. That feels like we still need support for it. I do think we'll deliver it, maybe a tiny bit late. I think we will deliver it. What is fascinating for me, the hardest project, is knowing what we want to get to, knowing that it's still insignificant and it's still not enough to create massive landscape scale change in Ireland. Everybody knows that we want to do it. There isn't really a better actor right now. Hopefully many more emerge in the space to deliver it, knowing that there's an appetite and knowing that we're completely fucked if we don't do it. And yet people are still saying, but you don't have eyes on the money yet. You don't have, you don't know who's going to do it yet. There isn't implementation teams. There isn't the nursery stock. That is the hardest challenge for me as the founder CEO, is to go like, no one knows how we're going to get there. If we knew how we were going to get there, we wouldn't be in this we wouldn't be in this position in the first place. So we just need to keep going until we figure it out, rather than stopping because we don't know. And as we become bigger, and our payroll becomes more, it's 100 grand a month at the moment, which is not nothing.
No.
And we have our insurance went up from 2 to 14 grand just at our HQ last year. Everything is complicated, and we won't know what our insurance is probably next year until we get there. And it's just about, we can't be certain because it's never been done in Ireland. We can't be certain because we don't know how to do it, but we're confident. And it's about like communicating confidence in place of certainty, and getting people to say yes to confidence, not certainty.
That sounds like quite a lot of stress. What I'm really curious about is when you approach, when you're thinking about this type of regeneration, and I guess that's the thing, like we're trying to understand how a forest comes back, right? Or how a landscape returns. And there's obviously all that complexity of how the living world would do things if it was left to its own. But you're kind of stewarding and trying to make, I guess you're trying to sort of make some interventions and what is that? How do you approach that kind of, like when you're thinking about where to plant, what to plant, because I guess there's a sort of,
again, that's we've got 6 ecologists, that's their problem. But it is pretty straightforward. It's like soil type wants a particular ecosystem to be there, and then there's different kind of interests, like the of a different region or catchment, or catchment really is that within a catchment, the most important interest in that area might be birds, or it might be grass, or it might be peat, or it might be trees. And the real, like what we need to work on as a nation, and all nations need to do, is like we can't be at odds with the different NGOs and people that want their thing achieved. We need to be able to say everything can be done, and we don't need to compete to change it, if that makes sense. So it's about, and because Ireland is very much a mosaic habitat, you can't be anywhere without seeing a little bit of woodland or a bog or or a little meadow. So we do need to be able to be pretty comfortable with complexity at this stage. And you talk about the interventions. What interventions do you take? I can't understate that the intervention that needs to be done is to speak and get in the way of. So it's not keeping the deer out, even though that's really important, or planting the trees, which is really important. We need to find a way to remunerate landowners in a way that competes with the different European or state-funded farm subsidies. That is the only intervention that needs addressing. It doesn't matter. Like, choosing your tree species is just like what I was just going to before. It's like, I ain't concentrating on the wolves, because that isn't the problem that is being solved today. What needs to be solved today is how to make sure that my neighbor, if he wants to add nature to his land, finds a way to still send his kids to school.
Yeah. That's
the only intervention. The ecological stuff is fairly straightforward.
But that's, again, I'm just curious, but that's, I get it. I totally understand that. But it also sounds like it's kind of like, that's because that's the reality of the systems that we're operating in.
Yeah.
But would that be different if that wasn't the reality? For example, would you be approaching this in a very different way? Because in some ways, because it feels like this is, you can look at this across all of the systems that we're all of these issues we're facing. There's this kind of, we're so pegged into, like, it's so pervasive the way, the economics of our world are holding everything.
Exactly.
And the impacts of that are also causing so much destruction. I just wonder whether if you're sensing, are there other ways that people start making decisions once this gets going? Because I'm interested, like, what other intelligences are people using, like, beyond this economic logic? Are we starting to sort of sense that the land has ideas, or and I'm imagining in Ireland there must be all kinds of other who did I see last night? I was watching, it was Martin Hayes.
Oh, wow.
And he was talking, he was talking about, he was in between songs, he was going, he was having a bit of a laugh, but he was kind of talking about, AI, and he was kind of saying, where I come from, there's a kind of like, there's a lot of other intelligence out on the land, and he was, he was talking about the fairies and this and that, and he was playing, but he was also clearly sort of, he was just saying there are other stories, there are other ways of knowing things out there. And I just wonder how that, if any of that comes through with the farmers and the landowners and the,
like, there is a lot of people out there that are doing amazing work, listening to the land without needing to see the check or the common agricultural policy change. Absolutely. And they're listening in a completely different way. And thank God, because they're people that we're modeling some of our ambition on, some of our, like, this is what your farm might look like in 5-10 years. We're using these, farming for nature ambassadors to show them. And it all depends on how people change. Kind of said it earlier, do you first need a consciousness shift, or do you need something to trigger a consciousness shift? Which one is it? We all approach transformation in different ways. For me, I needed stimulation. I needed a stimuli to change my consciousness. Then I could change my outlook and ultimately, what I chose to do next. And some people, they can get that by introspection, and that's maybe some more of these nature-based farmers that are already doing it. And some people need it through, like, out or exploration. The introvert, the extrovert. I'm an extrovert. I absolutely need other people to process with.
Yeah, no, totally. Are you? I guess. are you seeing, I mean, maybe it even exists, but you talk about, obviously there's multiple landowners and farmers. It's huge numbers that you said. Has there always been kind of strong community between individual landowners, digital farmers, and is now, as you're seeing more coming on board with this work, how is community shifting or changing, or is it? Because my sense is, like in the UK, what I've heard, from some farmers we've had on the program who may be looking at kind of different regen practices they're trying to bring in, and you often get a sense that there is a lot of loneliness amongst has been, and actually what they're finding is that they're building community around the work, which has been the most beautiful thing that's emerged, is that there's a much bigger sense of community. But as you know, there are maybe it's because there are less landowners.
I think the pioneers have always had a hell of a time feeling understood and connected, no matter what kind of modality they chose. And I can imagine, the organic farmer 30 years ago felt very lonely out there, and now the regen farmers probably feel lonely. And but the internet's been pretty handy for connecting people. I definitely see that culturally, there's this kind of cultural status quo, and in the farm shop, or at the agri store, up until recently the narrative around woodlands was I'll never put my land into forestry, and that was what would be said at the farm shop or maybe the pub. But pull them to the side and they're like, Jesus, there's a lovely little glen down there, and I love it's a beautiful hazel woodland or something. And I am seeing that shift definitely where I live, and it's, as I've kind of slowed down with people that I work with, I've definitely seen it more and more. It's, I could just talk so much. We've been recently looking at an invasive species management plan for a woodland that we're looking to remove the cherry laurel out of, right? And the fastest, most cost-effective way to do that is with glyphosate. And trying to understand a more nature-friendly version of it I thought would be really easy. I thought I would phone up the Soil Association in Ireland, and they'd just tell me, nah, this is exactly what you should do. You shouldn't touch that, the chemical, this is the way. And I just found it no one really could give bulletproof information on an effective way to combat invasive species like that. So I think we've still got a lot to learn, and I really want to I think that the ecological community should stay close, not divided. And, I see a major problem in political systems is that the left just fight amongst themselves, while the right just tear into it because they can actually hunker around one thing and get on with it. And I think that it should be important too. Like that glyphosate thing was fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the thing, isn't it? There's so much we don't know, and there's so much that we're and we're still working with massive constraints. So I guess we're having to hold lots of conflicting stuff for longer.
I mean, the problem, like my wife's a nonviolent communication teacher, and so I've been lucky to understand more about my own confusion and what conflict means. But when I'm confused at work, and if there isn't a good space for me to explore that with someone else that doesn't know the answer, I'm already at odds with myself. That's why I'm confused. And I'm going into a room with someone else that's also confused, i.e. parts of them are conflicted, i.e. they're in odds with themselves. And we're going into a room imagining to emerge clear, which is just like crazy to think that. So unless you're going in knowing that you're in there to figure it out, explore, it can be edgy, and that's that's why you can have in in any ecological non-profit startup where people they're all pioneering stuff, and in that pioneering there's often separation, emerging, and sometimes you don't catch it early enough, and sometimes you catch it early enough and you can transform that confusion into cohesion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you're speaking to is, and that's happening everywhere, right? I mean, it's probably that is probably one of the biggest things that we're all trying to figure out. Right? How do we? Because we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know life, right?
Right.
We've never done it.
We've never done this before,
Yeah.
and so we're all working with so much uncertainty. But most of us have been, we're kind of programmed to believe we know. You know what I mean, or we need to know. And it's a pretty crazy time. And you must. I guess that must be fascinating though, because you're also. I'm imagining. I mean, you're working with funds, and whether they're coming from government or corporate or whatever. There's, again, I guess there's also some hardening around those, relationships, right? In terms of like, how do you work with that kind of complexity and uncertainty? And
my job's fascinating. I work, like with a big team that hasn't done it before, in an organization that didn't exist before. People are doing positions that didn't exist before they got them, and it's just loads of people going like. So it was really important, like, to pick optimists. It really was important to pioneer. You had to go with people that were like, we're going to end the day and go, that was great. And we had to go there with people that also said, I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out. That was also really important. And people that were like, the end of the relationship, the team cohesion at the end of the day has to be more important than any of the micro decisions we make each day, because there's going to be thousands upon thousands in each department of micro decisions, and that team cohesion was actually more important than someone being right or wrong. So that has been, that kind of crafting of that team in the early years was really important. But I am at the intersection also with funders and finance and debt and payroll and these kind of things, and I have to have, and I do have, it's not even I have to, I have this real sense that it's the right thing to do, and this real sense, and I can also see the writing on the wall, that the ecological and financial landscape, that there is going to be money for this kind of work. There's a organization in England called Oxy Conservation, right? They're 4 years old. They bought 55,000 hectares in the last 4 years. We've bought 500 hectares. 55,000 hectares, 500. And this is venture capitalists putting in money to a nature fund, imagining they're going to get return on their nature investment. There is going to be money given to nature, given back to nature, because ultimately it's been extracted out of there in the first place. So there is going to be money given back to it. So we really have, and I think it's really important that in Ireland there is a not-for-profit actor in that space, that it's not just the state and for-profit nature financing middlemen. I think that's really important.
Wow. Starts blowing my mind when we start talking about these kind of financial, those kind of acquisitions of land at that scale. And
I was on a panel at Blue Earth Summit a few years ago, and I was with the chief exec of Dartmoor, the Lake District, and one other national park in England. I don't think it was Bodmin. And then there was me, and we this tiny little organization from Ireland. I don't know why, maybe because I was a surfer, but they were saying on that stage that all of the land masses of those 3 national parks sewn together, which produce something like 140,000 hectares, they couldn't produce enough nature within that farm, let's just call it, to satisfy Santander, the bank's need for nature credits. It needs the size of the farm to make the product, which is a nature credit, needs to be massive. And that's why companies historically have bought these carbon credits or nature credits from the global south, because you can just go to Colombia, buy 500,000 hectares of forest, say you're not going to cut it down, and satisfy your corporate social responsibility, or the carbon footprint of the company that you were running. It's super edgy.
Yeah. Who knows where that's all going to end up?
But people do.
Yeah.
There's some really smart people working on it, and like CSRD that was supposed to come in this year said that you had to give back to the company, the country that you did business in, and that's why countries like England and Ireland were scrambling to come up with this kind of standardized or regularized framework for nature credits, but the land mass wasn't big enough to service the machine that they were used to using. Because they were used to using these machines in America or the global south where they had massive farms that could produce these credits, and it didn't work on our tiny little farms or national parks here. Sorry, I was going off on a pretty big tangent, but that's like really the kind of cutting edge part of where I'm working.
Wow. So just what are you, so it's okay, so sort of zooming out of Hometree and where you are now, where you've been on the West Coast, seeing, how are you seeing life shifting and changing, and what are you, when you think of the you're looking ahead at the future, what are you imagining, what are you sensing, what are you trying to, outside of the Hometree mission, but because you're someone that cares deeply about this world we're part of and the future, and you as someone that has, as I say, I remember, you've done a lot of work around collapse and that kind of work. I mean, how do you sense, where do you see what's unfolding where you're at? Are you hopeful that there is a kind of the energy is building for people around what's coming down the line, and people are stepping in different ways, or do you still... Yeah, I just want to understand where you're, do you feel that we're way off in terms of that energy of participation that's building in different sectors and different parts of the culture that you're in, or just trying to get a sense,
Yeah, I see, a huge appetite for nature, for, personal transformation, to kind of transform your own pain story, your own suffering. I see like such there's like everyone, like you said, is like in pain, or
carrying loss.
Yeah, i.e. in pain, right?
Yeah, right.
I do believe that there is a few people, enlightened beings out there that aren't, but they probably work on it every day. But so that's why I was like, I catch you there. Yeah. But I think there is a lot of, so I think that there's lots of humans that are really desperate to live in a different world. And the trend, in the small perspective that I have, is that you need to be luckier and luckier and luckier to have a nice life. You need, like that's kind of the story of capitalism, is that you can get out, and I see that it's fewer and fewer people are gonna have access to the sweetness that I have right now, and I was like on the threshold of that luck. I just snuck in, and that makes me really sad. That's I how could I possibly be hopeful with that perspective? It's not. I'm hopeless about it. I hope that we can cling on. I hope that, I suppose from a nature point of view, I do believe that we are going to see recovery. I think that our national parks are going to get more attention. I think that, the way in which we farm large landscapes is changing. I don't think it cannot not change, or I don't think it cannot not change. So I think nature might be okay. I think our connection to it might not be. I'd be pretty fearful. The internet, we've seen it in our lifetimes. I don't think it was a good thing, and I know that there's plenty of arguments for it, but I can't see this age of AI improving our lives. I don't know how it could. My productivity has gone up astronomically since someone could spell check properly for me, and someone that could do math real good and tell me where to buy the right part for my tent. Google was shite compared to ChatGPT. Like, it's just brilliant. So I wouldn't be hopeful. I'm gonna stick at it. How can I exist every day in a place that isn't that I don't feel hopeful for. Probably because I have accepted, like, part of the deep adaptation work is around understanding hopelessness. I got super pissed off when Patagonia changed their slogan when they were like, no hope into, what was it? They changed no hope into hope no, or hopeless into hopeful. I was like, I felt annoyed that they kind of told people that they should be helpful, because I think that can be dangerous when you're like telling people that it's going to be all right, especially to sell stuff. I start nearly every talk that I do with like, we're in a fucking pickle, and I end it with, we're in a fucking pickle, because anything less than would be disrespectful to the people that are listening. We do a lot of conferences, a lot of talks, a lot of events, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. And we're also not going to, like, we did a big conference last month, and part of the conference committee were like, we can't leave people feeling desperate at the end of it. And I was like, we can also celebrate life and have a hell of a lot of fun. So what we did, instead of like doing this like, a hopeful panel at the end, was we had a comedian come in, and he ripped the shit out of everyone, and we were all laughing our heads off. We can absolutely celebrate life, but it doesn't mean we need to kind of skew reality to make us feel better about where we're at. How's that to hear?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm there. I mean, I always feel that we have to hold it all. We have to at least speak to it. We can't deny the mess we're in.
I think that's it. I do think we can get. It can be.
Yeah.
It could be. It may be way more beautiful than we imagine. But I exist from the place where I'm like, it doesn't look like it's getting there today. Thus, I'm going to get out of bed and I'm going to try my best to make sure that we might be in with a better chance. And because of that, if I believe that we're going to be fine in 10 years, I'd just go to an ashram and just like meditate, because it's epic. Or I'd go and do these singing camps every week, or I'd, do anything but this. So that's why, I get out of bed and tear into it. It's also my job. I do get paid for it. But if I thought it was okay, I wouldn't do the work that I did. I earned more sailing 12 years ago in the South Pacific than I do now,
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that. So, are you do you get much time to get in the ocean?
I get in the sea a lot. Yeah, I live really close to the sea. Not close enough. Like, you said that your special place is in the woods. For me, it's the beach. Maybe that's why I found temperate rainforests, because they're so wet and they're all along the west coast. But I feel absolutely most at ease when I'm on the seashore or in the sea. That is the air that I breathe that relaxes me. So I'm at the beach nearly every day. I jump in the sea a lot. And, the last few years, I mean, I did have 2 kids in 5 years, so I didn't surf as much as I wanted to, but I still got one pretty large tube each year, some years more than one. So I still, I'm still pushing myself. And yeah, I'm actually going to, when I'm in Cornwall next week, I'm interviewing to join SAS board. So I got through the first round, and we'll see if I get it. I mean, I'm a bit young to be on boards, but I do have a lot of experience, and it's mostly what I want to do is just this. How much more time do we have? How much more can I divert? Just one of the last things that that's like really alive in my job at the moment is, as a charity, as a not-for-profit or a community organization, you're relying on volunteers often. And often what those volunteers do is they bring their reputation. And people rarely want to risk their reputation. People would be really happy to risk some of the money that they had in their bank over their reputation. So we get a board we get a lot of people volunteering to join boards of all organizations, charities and not-for-profits. And when they get on there, they're like, I desperately want to work for nature. This is really important. This is my life's work. And then we're like, cool, but to get there, we need to have an appetite for risk, and we need to not know where we're going. And both of those things are scary, and we're asking those board members to put their reputations on the line. So like, whoa, wait a second. I didn't say yes to that, but that's what they were saying yes to. And in the meantime, our competition is massive corporate giants that don't have any reputation. They're faceless, nameless, and actually all they're looking for is a 6% return. So as long as they get that, they're happy to proceed. And then we're going like, oh, but what about our reputation? And that for me is like one of the key things is we need people that join boards, we need them to join with their reputation, but throw it all on the line, just like people that invest in a startup, throw it all on the line, that they might not get it back. And if we can't find a way to kind of reconfigure them, charities or not-for-profits are never going to compete with these corporations. They cannot. Yeah, one of the things.
Another mission.
It's all part of the same mission. And, you know, like everything I've spoken about, it's funneled through Hometree. You know, Hometree, all of my kind of ideas have been, you know, funneled through it. And, you know, I was working with people in nature, in collaboration with people in nature my whole life. First, it was lifeguarding. So last thing is purpose driven. It's like lifeguarding was group of cool people outside doing something meaningful. And then I went sailing, cool people outside moving, like the purpose was crystal clear. We're going from, say, New Zealand to Indonesia. So you couldn't be, there was a purpose around it. And then I went into farming, growing vegetables and not-for-profit with great people outside, purpose driven. And then it was Hometree again. So it hasn't changed. The spaceship that I'm on maybe has a different name or a different sticker on the side. And same with Finisterre. It's been a wicked ride with those guys. They've just been overcoming challenge after challenge after challenge and clinging on for dear life. So
sounds like a metaphor for our time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly, clinging on for dear life. So on that, Matt, so we have you know, I guess as this podcast has progressed over the years, I've ended up sort of exploring this, you know, the Spaceship Earth metaphor, but this kind of shift that these times are calling for, which is, you know, stepping away from a kind of passenger mentality, which I think modernity has really kind of like ingrained in many of us, that we're just here sort of taking what we want and somehow we're separate from the spaceship itself. And, you know, and this invitation to becoming crew, as we call it, what does that manifest, that invitation of becoming crew in this time? What comes up for you?
You know, using NVC, it's like, you know, what needs am I trying to meet? Like, why would I be joining that spaceship? You know, and if I can understand which of the 88 universal human needs I'm meeting by any particular strategy, then I can actually serve them. Does that make sense? So, you know, becoming crew, you know, I went to this festival for connection, transformation, and relaxation or rest. I didn't get to relax very much with the kids camping, but I can really connect with those things once I understand why I'm going there. But, you know, like Hometree for me had to be, it was really strategic. It was, I knew exactly what it was needing to do, and being really explicit. So I suppose becoming crew means being explicit. It's turning so I can communicate clearly what's important to me, and I can understand and help anybody else communicate clearly to me what's important to them. And once we get that clarity, everything becomes crystal.
And knowing what you know about, you know, why we're in the shit we're in, and you know, the kind of things that we're being invited to step into as humans, as human crew on board this living spaceship. If our listeners was, again, sort of thinking about this time and what is it that's being called from them, what would you suggest? Like, what is the kind of the calling, or what might people want to be considering in terms of, like, you know, stepping into this moment, stepping into the not knowing? And what have you learned that might be, that you could share maybe just as an invitation?
I think, like, back to the understanding my needs, like, you know, that's really important. Find a way to transition, to transform, that's kind of gentle and soft, not these huge painful transitions, you know, which can be really, really traumatic and really, you know, take years off your life, or, you know, put you back to zero again. And so find ways to transform safely. Understand yourself through something like NVC, or just inquiry, And coffee is hell. Stay away from caffeine. One of the things I say with one of our head COO is anyone can do this with coffee and cortisol, but can we do it without that gnarly stimulation of cortisol or the gnarly, aggressive caffeine? And I go through nearly 6 months on, 6 months off, and we found strategies to kind of limit the cortisol drip, but life's definitely beautiful when you're not super stimulated or completely overrun with cortisol.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time
Stoked to be here.
and all you're doing, and keep getting those trees in the ground. By the sounds of things, it's going to be a beautiful thing, hopefully, and to look back on in the years ahead of what you've started.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, I always think that success, there's stages of success, right? But one of the major ones will be when the kind of the founders can leave and it still function really well. That will be a key one, really looking back and going, cool, this is definitely bigger than any of the founders for sure, but founders have a particular enthusiasm to keep things going, and can it succeed rounds of that, then yes. So thanks for having me on.
Go well out there. Yeah. Thanks, Matt. So, that was a conversation with Matt Smith. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you received. And if you did, let us know what you're receiving, and perhaps share with a friend. This is the reciprocity of becoming crew. If we're receiving, how do we keep that receiving energy by passing on? And that's what we require here for more folks to find us. We're ad free. We're still mainly self-funded, but with a growing listener subscriber. So if you're interested in supporting the work of the podcast, go to becomingcrew.substack.com. And if you sign up to the Substack, you'll get all the Spaceship Earth podcast episodes emailed to your inbox. You'll get weekly writing, often weekly or weekly-ish, from myself and other guides, Becoming Crew guides. You'll get updates on events that we're doing online. We do these unlearning events in the winter with various guests. We do on-land experiences. We have a overnight nature solo weekend, the third weekend of September, autumn equinox weekend, on Ghostwood Down, which is land near the city of Bath where I live. That's a beautiful, beautiful experience. Real medicine for these times. So you can register to that. So all of that is the best way to keep on top of all that is to subscribe to the Substack. And if you're feeling generous, flip to a paid subscription for about £7 a month. It's about the price of a pint, apparently. I don't drink anymore. About the price of a pint a month, and that will help support the mission. So thanks for listening. Look after yourself out there, and take care of those around you. And keep on re-entangling with this extraordinary mystery of life on board Spaceship Earth. And until next time, peace and out.
This podcast is created in service to life, for you. It takes time, funds and energy to make. If you'd like to contribute to the running costs, you can donate the price of a cuppa or a pint. Find the link on our website. This podcast wouldn't exist without the following crew: Charlie Shred, Audio Jedi; Seaman Home Burgess, Engine Room; Willow Burgess, Jingles.